We're all familiar with artists that have blown up and fallen off, but what about artists that never let it get to that point? Artists who were on the rise or at the top of their career and then just disappeared. So today I have gathered 5 of these musicians who have mysteriously vanished and were never found again. Starting off with Richey Edwards. A couple things real quick before I get into it. First of all, I have a haircut coming up soon, so you guys don't have to worry anymore about, my hair being in my eyes. I'll look a little bit more well-groomed in the next video, so no longer do you guys need to comment, why is your hair in your eyes, or whatever else. Don't worry. Next thing is, this video was not inspired by Tuv or Wavy Web Surf's videos about YouTubers that went missing. I just stole it and decided to repurpose it about musicians. So sorry guys for stealing your video. Anyways, let's continue. So Richey Edwards was a guitarist and songwriter for the band Manic Street Preachers back in the 80s and 90s. However, he went missing on February 1st of 1995 and has not been found since. So he was declared presumed dead in 2008. This has led to so many theories about how he disappeared and why he disappeared and what happened afterwards. So, what led up to Edwards' disappearance and why was he never found? Well, the band Manic Street Preachers was formed in 1986, and Richey Edwards was a friend of the members, so he eventually joined in 89. He joined as a guitarist, but he was more so known for his great songwriting. People often point out how Richey was extremely smart, he loved to read, and studied political history in university. The band was very anti-establishment and politically oriented, and they eventually signed to a record label in 1990. Shortly after signing, Richey would pull a stunt that would help the band receive a ton more attention. They had been going back and forth with a journalist named Steve Lamacq, whose main complaint about Manic Street Preachers is that they weren't really serious about their art. Lamacq kept asking if they were for real, so Richey pulled him aside and carved the phrase "for real" into his arm. Shortly after this, he was taken to the hospital, and NME ran the story, which caught major attention. But despite all of the attention the story was receiving and all of the criticism the band was getting, many people neglected the fact that there may be some issues with Richey's mental health. He had been pretty open about it in interviews, admitting to self-harm, and he would also eventually suffer from insomnia and anorexia.
I think the older you get, the more life becomes more miserable. All the people you grow up with die. Your parents die, your grandparents die, your dog dies, your energy diminishes, there's less books to read, there's no more groups to discover. You just end up a barren wasteland, just trying to find something new, which never really occurs.
Anyways, after the For Real incident, Manic Street Preachers signed to Columbia Records, and then they put out their debut studio album, Generational Terrorists. The album was released in 1992, and it helped propel them into the mainstream. The band then followed up with 2 more albums, Gold Against the Soul and The Holy Bible. The Holy Bible is often seen as one of their best albums, with around 70% of the lyrics being written by Richey. It makes even more sense when a lot of the lyrics are very dark. Around this time, Richey was in a pretty rough place. He was in and out of the hospital, and he was dealing with a lot of mental health problems. In an interview in 1994, Richey was quoted saying, "In terms of the S word, that does not enter my mind, and it never has done, in terms of an attempt. Because I'm stronger than that. I might be a weak person, but I can take pain." Many close friends agreed that Richey didn't seem the type to do such a thing. But everything would change on February 1st of 1995, the day that Richey went missing. 2 weeks prior to going missing, Richey had recently shaved his head and began withdrawing 200 pounds a day from the bank, totaling 2,800 pounds before his disappearance. Then on January 23rd of 1995, Richey sat down for his last interview ever, in which he said, "People try saying they're strong, but that's not true. Everyone is weak," which is a pretty scary statement after previously saying that he would never take his own life because he was strong. The night before he disappeared, he gave a book called Novel with Cocaine to one of his friends and told her to read the introduction, which was about the author staying in a mental asylum before he vanished. Richey was staying in a hotel at the time, preparing to leave for tour in the United States. He grabbed some books and videos, put them in a box, and wrote "I love you" on a note, all of which was intended for his recent girlfriend. Then on February 1st of 1995, Richey checked out of his hotel at 7 in the morning and disappeared. There were a few sightings of him between a fan, a taxi driver, and others, which paint a rough picture of what happened. Then on February 14th, 2 weeks after going missing, Richey's car was ticketed at the Severn View service station, and 3 days later it was reported as abandoned. The car battery was dead, there were pictures of Richey's family, and it looked as if someone had been living in the car. A mile from the service station, there's a bridge called the Severn Bridge, and the method of people leaving their car at the station and then jumping off the bridge to take their lives isn't too uncommon. So that is what many people assume Richey did. However, a lot of people also speculate that he staged his death and now lives elsewhere for a variety of different possibilities. possible reasons. One of the times he was spotted while he was missing was in a passport office, leading people to speculate he got a new passport under a different identity. They also think this is why he was pulling out so much money. On top of that, there have been unconfirmed sightings of Richey in India, some Spanish islands, and other places. In 2019, a book was published called Withdrawn Traces: Searching for the Truth About Richey Manic. The book explores the idea that he fled to Israel after meeting a woman in the hospital who he fell in love with who happened to be from Israel. The author also pointed out how Richey was fascinated by authors and writers who fled where they lived to live off of the grid. The book was also written with help from Richey's sister Rachel, who gave them tons of information and access to things like his diary. So because of all of this, one of the main theories as to what happened to Richey is that he faked his death, fled to Israel to live with this girl, and is still hopefully living there peacefully. That would obviously be ideal because the former option was much more depressing. Regardless, like I mentioned earlier, he was presumed dead in 2008, and nothing has been heard from or seen from Richey in 28 years. I'm gonna link an amazing video in the description by DeBurk321 who explores this in a little bit more detail if you're interested. And while Richey Edwards has been missing for 28 years, Mr. Fantastik has been missing since 2004, leaving fans puzzled about what happened to the mysterious musician. Mr. Fantastik is not only an artist that disappeared, but he's probably the most mysterious artist on this list. The reason we're familiar with Mr. Fantastik is because he's featured on 2 MF Doom songs, including one of his biggest songs, Rapp, Snitch, Knishes. He doesn't even have his own solo career, or at least one that we know of. Mr. Fantastik's identity has never been revealed and has been shrouded in mystery for years, so let's check it out. So Mr. Fantastik's first appearance was on the song Antimatter by King Ghidorah, an alter ego of MF Doom's. Also, every time I say King Ghidorah or King Ghidorah or however you're supposed to say it, no matter which way I say it, people say I'm saying it wrong. So let me know how you say it in the comments, and the most liked comment will be correct. Anyways, it was on this song that Mr. Fantastik dropped a hint as to who he is when he said, "Known to stack a mean stash, they used to call me Pure Math." That song was released in 2003, and 4 years prior, Doom had shouted out someone named Pure Mathematics on his song Go With The Flow. Then, like I said, Mr. Fantastik was featured on Rapp, Snitch, Knishes, one of Doom's biggest songs. However, after the release of that album, he just vanished. Nothing has been heard from or about Mr. Fantastik since that song was released in 2004, which many people find odd when he was 1, such a talented rapper, and 2, working with such a popular artist. However, many people have speculated who he is and why he disappeared. He revealed on Rapp, Snitch, Knishes that he was from New York, the same place that Doom grew up. Doom also confirmed this in an interview he did with the House List. So because of this, many people speculate that Doom and Mr. Fantastik were close pals, which is a very reasonable speculation. Anyways, there are many theories because of these clues as to who Mr. Fantastik is. Some point to a New York-based rap group called UFOs, comprised of a guy called Slim Pickens and another called Mr. Fantastik. Others point to friends and collaborators of Doom, such as Rodan and Count Bass D. And some people even speculate that RZA, 50 Cent, Jay-Z, and others were Mr. Fantastik. However, that clearly isn't true. The most plausible theory is one that a user posted on Reddit years ago. This user is some random guy, so take his opinion with a grain of salt, but it does make the most sense logically. The Reddit user said one of their friends grew up with Doom and was close with him up until his passing. The Redditor said they asked their friend who Mr. Fantastik was, and the friend said, "Mr. Fantastik is just a guy they all grew up with." Back in the 80s and 90s, pretty much everybody on the streets could lay together a few rhymes. Some really talented people who just never made it to the scene for one reason or another. Doom and Sub Rock grew up with the guy. His alias growing up was Pure Mathematics. And this theory was further confirmed when Count Bass D, the guy who I mentioned earlier some people thought was Mr. Fantastik, addressed the claims on Instagram Live.
But the thing of it is this is 2 friends bugging out, freestyling, or, writing some quick rhymes in the studio, having fun. Like, the man obviously doesn't want to reveal himself. If he hasn't dropped anything else in 14, 15 years.
So what most people tend to assume is that Mr. Fantastik or Pure Math was just one of MF Doom's close friends growing up. They made a few songs together for fun. He didn't decide to pursue a musical career for whatever reason, and is now living a regular life doing whatever it is he wants to do. At least that's what people thought up until June of 2022, when a mysterious Instagram page called Mr. Fantastik MF popped up. Of course, many people's first thoughts were to think it was a troll because, it's the internet, but as he started posting videos of him traveling to various places, people instantly began to recognize his iconic voice. I'm not fully sure if this is 100% his account, but I think most people in the community assume that it is. And to further prove the claim that Mr. Fantastik is back, the record label Nature Sounds posted a picture of Mr. Fantastik, which might be the only one of him on the internet. And on top of all of that, your old Droog, a rapper in the hip-hop community, tweeted a couple times about him meeting Mr. Fantastik and working on some music together. So it may be possible that Mr. Fantastik is back to making music, and maybe one day we'll get to hear a new Mr. Fantastik song. And while Mr. Fantastik most likely went MIA for regular reasons, Jim Sullivan's strange disappearance nearly 50 years ago has spawned many conspiracy theories. Jim Sullivan is an artist who disappeared nearly 50 years ago, and the circumstances of his disappearance have led to many conspiracy theories, including some about him being abducted by aliens. So of course, let's check it out. So Jim Sullivan's life growing up was always a little rough, and he grew up in a government housing project. As he was growing up, he found a passion for music after listening to local blues groups, and he eventually joined a local rock band called The Survivors as a guitarist. Eventually, him and a friend bought a bar together, but the business failed, so he moved out to Los Angeles in 1968 when he was 28, likely with the intention of pursuing a music career. He hated the idea of working for another man and wanted to carve out a path for himself. While his wife was working at Capitol Records, Sullivan began to write songs and perform at various venues in LA. He then began working on his debut album, raising funds to purchase studio sessions, working with some important artists at the time. Jim pitched the album to someone at Capitol Records, but they refused to release it. So instead, he released it through an indie label that he created with his friend. His debut studio album, UFO, was released in 1969. And in my opinion, after listening to it a few times today, I think it's pretty good. However, by Jim's standards, the album flopped and failed to help him grow his audience. One of his friends said that they even used to joke about the number of copies it sold. However, a few years later, Jim had another shot when Playboy Records, a recently formed record label by Hugh Hefner, asked Jim to join their ranks. He then began working on his self-titled album, but apparently record stores at the time didn't know what to do with an album attached to Playboy, and the label's marketing wasn't great. Yet again, Jim had another flop. His failures led him to alcohol as a way to cope with the fact that his wife was stuck providing for his 2 kids and his failing music career. The Playboy record marked the dissolution of our family. It was made with care and love and quality, but no one was buying it. So Jim came up with a plan. He would travel to Nashville in hopes to make his music career finally work out and give it one last shot. And when it did work out, he would have his family come live with him. However, Jim may have had other plans in mind. So Jim Sullivan left LA on March 4th of 1975. The next day, he called his wife and told her he was all right, and when she questioned him more, he said, "You wouldn't believe if I told you." When she asked what he meant by this, he said, "Forget it. Just forget I said anything. I'll call you from Nashville." Following that, he was stopped by Highway Patrol because they thought he was drunk, but after passing a sobriety test, they sent him on his way with a warning. He then checked into a hotel in Santa Rosa, New Mexico. Days then passed with no calls from Jim, so his family began investigating. Police checked out his hotel and said the bed was never even slept in. They also said he left his hotel room key inside the room and had recently bought vodka. A few days later, the police located his car, which was on a remote ranch over 20 miles away from the town. Inside his car, they found money, papers, his guitar, some clothes, and a box of his unsold records. His friend said, "When I heard that, I knew he wasn't coming back. No matter what, Jim would have never left his guitar." He was reportedly last seen walking away from his car, and that was the last time anyone would ever see Jim Sullivan. As the search continued, theories would begin to pop up like he was killed by bandits or the police or whoever else. One gas station attendant even said that Jim was asking for directions back to California, and friends didn't think that he was the type to take his life. But one of the craziest theories is that he was abducted by aliens, which really only existed because of his first album, UFO. Both Jim and his wife did believe in aliens and UFOs, and he actually went missing somewhat near Roswell, New Mexico, a place where many people theorized there was a UFO crash. On top of that, many of his lyrics seem like clues or premonitions about his future to come. However, the most likely theory is that he was drunk, distraught, and depressed because of his failing music career, leading him to wander away and possibly even take his own life in the wilderness. What makes his story even more tragic is that in 2010, his album UFO was reissued and outperformed all of his previous record sales combined. He even has millions of plays on Spotify today, but unfortunately, Jim wasn't around to see his career grow. And while Jim's career wasn't very fruitful, Shiloh Dynasty had an extremely successful career before she vanished. Shiloh Dynasty Dynasty is an artist that will go down in history as one of the most mysterious yet impactful artists ever. She only released 2 full songs and a bunch of snippets and somehow still became a multi-platinum artist. However, after 2016, Shiloh disappeared and no one knows what happened, leaving so many people wondering why such a promising artist would just up and vanish. So Shiloh began posting short clips of her singing and playing the guitar back in 2014 on Vine. Simply because of how good they were, they immediately began going viral. She would barely show her face, adding much more mystery to her identity. Then in 2015, Shiloh started posting on Instagram, which allowed for slightly longer clips, in turn helping her blow up even more. On top of that, tons of producers were sampling her vocal clips and turning them into beats, a trend that would continue to this day. A lot of people like to point out one IG post she made that stated, "I'm not a look, I'm a feeling," which may represent how she felt about her musical output and why she chose not to reveal herself too much. Anyways, by the end of 2016, she had tens of thousands of followers on Instagram and made her last post in December. But after September of 2016, Shiloh Dynasty disappeared. Nothing has been heard from her since, despite her blowing up to extreme heights in her absence. For a while after her disappearance, people speculated that she was dead, but this theory was put to rest pretty quickly when she created an LLC in February of 2017. People weren't quite sure why she did this, but some had hopes that it was for new music. Then in August of 2017, xxxtentacion released his debut album 17, which to many fans' surprise featured some Shiloh Dynasty samples. Shiloh was featured on 3 of the songs: Jocelyn Flores, Everybody Dies in Their Nightmares, and Carry On, 2 of which have over 1 billion streams on Spotify. But despite eventually becoming a multi-platinum artist, Shiloh still never made an appearance. These songs would also inspire a whole new style of music that people would try to replicate. Shiloh's vocals would also be sampled by artists like Young Thug, Juice WRLD, Trippie Redd, and more. The idea that she died was further put to rest when X's producer John Cunningham clarified that they had all been in the studio together, and when rumors she died were spread, John said that X called her to make sure she was all good. Shiloh still remained silent even after her crazy success when working with X, which led to a bunch of people trying to figure out who she was and what happened to her. People had come up with some theories and they even found her real name on X's album credits, but still nothing came of it. Other than her real name, no one really knew what she looked like and no one knew where to look. And to this day, no one knows what happened. The closest people have gotten to finding out what happened to Shiloh is by reaching out to previous managers and acquaintances. One friend Genius reached out to thought she died after disappearing in 2016, but as it turns out, she just cut them off. They also reached out to her manager, who said she is an intensely private person and that is all I have to say on the matter. The most recent update we have had is from a fairly trustworthy source in the Shiloh Dynasty community that said, "New info has shown us that Shiloh has indeed cut off ties to anything to do with the name Shiloh. We can't directly disclose this info as it contains the personal details of others. All I can disclose is that we've had a confirmation from official representatives of Shiloh's LLC from the years 2019 to 2020 that have shown us that Shiloh has no intention of returning as a client to their services. And while there is no explicit source, it would make sense as it seems Shiloh, despite her amazing success, would like to remain private." But unlike Shiloh Dynasty, Christina McKechnie had a much more strange disappearance in 1987, which has spawned many rumors. Christina "Licorice" McKechnie is an artist who went missing in 1987 and has not been heard from since 1990, leading many people to theorize about what happened to her, especially since she was a member of Scientology. Anyways, Christina began dating a musician by the name of Robin Williamson, whose band she would eventually join. The band was called the Incredible String Band, a band that was known for pioneering psychedelic folk music, and according to Christina's ex-husband of 3 years, the band was a Scientology band. What he means by that is they got a ton of people to follow the Scientology religion. Christina joined in 1968, performed with the band at Woodstock in '69, and had a solid run with them. However, she left the band in 1972 after breaking up with Robin Williamson. After that, she had been seen performing at Scientology events, and she had been in and out of a few other bands. Other than that, though, there isn't a whole lot of information on her, except for the fact that she married a man by the name of Brian Lambert in the late 70s, who will become very important very soon. Anyways, she wasn't very active in the music scene anymore in the 80s, and had been moving around from place to place. But in 1987, she was supposedly last seen hitchhiking in the Arizona desert. Her sister also claimed that she was last seen in 1990 while recovering from a surgery in Sacramento. But no one really knows what's true or false, and her disappearance has been a huge mystery for decades. We aren't even sure if a missing missing persons report was filed, and I feel like if it was, someone on the internet would have found it by now. However, recently in an interview with Ron Miscavige, her ex-husband Brian disclosed a lot of information about her and what may have happened. Apparently, as a member of Scientology, she made it to OT level 3. Now, I'm not going to sit here and pretend I know what OT level 3 means, or I fully understand it, but I think it's some sort of like ideology they give you. It's like some sort of paper with instructions and ideologies that they give you, and they drill it into your brain, and apparently those made Christina go crazy. Either that or it's a drug, but he wasn't talking about it like it's a drug, so I'm very confused. Anyways, he said that she went so crazy that he claims she decided to live in his backyard and eventually live homeless elsewhere.
So that's what happened to Likky, everybody. Scientology drove her insane. The OT3 materials, she's constantly looking for body thetans in her bodies 8 hours a day, you know, trying to figure out and saying, this is how I'm going to be happy. This is how I'm going to overcome my problems. This is how I'm going to become a better person. This is how I'm going to become spiritually enlightened by listening to BTs in my head. Drove my wife insane. She became schizophrenic.
Even he has no idea what happened to Christina after she went crazy. No one knows if she's alive, where she is, or what happened to her. Maybe she died in the desert, maybe she moved back to the UK, maybe she's still homeless, maybe she's living somewhere in the United States, or maybe she even went back to the Church of Scientology. No one really knows. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know which of these was the most interesting to you. Comment down below any other video ideas you might have, because I'm kind of running low. But other than that, thank you guys for watching. I really appreciate it. Leave a like if you liked. I love you all. Have a wonderful rest of your day. I'm in a good mood, and I'll see you guys next time.